While serving coffee, the waitress saw the Billionaire Tycoon's pendant. It was her father's. The Seattle rain drummed against the windows of Grind Coffee House as Maya Chen tied her apron around her waist for another double shift. At 26, she had perfected the art of existing on 4 hours of sleep, juggling her job as a waitress with night classes at Seattle Community College. The familiar aroma of roasted beans and the hiss of the espresso machine created a soundtrack she knew by heart. "Table 7 wants their usual," called out Jake, her co-worker, sliding past with a tray of steaming mugs. Maya glanced at the corner booth where 3 men in expensive suits sat hunched over laptops and documents. She'd been serving the same group for weeks now. They always ordered black coffee and spoke in hushed tones about acquisitions and market volatility. Maya approached their table with practiced efficiency, her white sneakers squeaking softly against the worn linoleum. "Good morning, gentlemen. The usual black coffee all around." The man facing her looked up from his phone, and Maya felt her breath catch. She'd seen him before, of course, but today something was different. A pendant hung from his neck, partially visible beneath his crisp white shirt, a small, intricately carved jade dragon that seemed to glow against his chest. Her hand trembled as she poured his coffee, causing a few drops to splash onto the saucer. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, reaching for a napkin to clean the spill. "No problem at all," the man said, his voice surprisingly warm. "Happens to the best of us." But Maya wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the pendant, her mind racing back. 20 years to her childhood home in San Francisco's Chinatown. She remembered her father, David Chen, wearing the exact same piece of jewelry, a family heirloom passed down through generations. He told her stories about how his grandfather had carved it himself in Guangzhou before immigrating to America in the 1920s. "Miss, are you all right?" The man's voice seemed to come from far away. Maya blinked, realizing she'd been staring. "Yes, your pendant. It's beautiful." "Where did you get it?" The man's expression shifted slightly, his fingers unconsciously moving to touch the jade dragon. "It was a gift," he said carefully, "from someone very important to me." "Maya, table 4, needs their order." Jake's voice cut through her trance and she forced herself to move away, but not before catching the man's name tag from his briefcase. Richard Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Industries. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Every time she glanced toward table 7, she found herself studying the pendant, comparing it to the memories that had been locked away for so long. When her father disappeared when she was 6 years old, he'd been wearing that pendant. Her mother had told her he'd gone on a business trip and never came back, leaving them with nothing but debt and unanswered questions. As the afternoon wore on, Maya's hands shook with increasing intensity. She spilled 2 more orders and nearly dropped a full tray of dishes. The other waitresses began to whisper, and her manager, Tom, pulled her aside during her break. "Look, Maya, I know you've been working hard, but you're making mistakes out there. Maybe you should go home early today." Maya nodded numbly, untying her apron with unsteady fingers, but as she gathered her things from the staff room, she couldn't shake the image of that pendant from her mind. The way it caught the light, the specific curve of the dragon's tail, the tiny chip on the left wing that she remembered tracing with her finger as a child. By the time she stepped out into the Seattle drizzle, Maya had made a decision. Tomorrow, she would find a way to talk to Richard Blackwood again. She needed to know where he'd gotten that pendant, and more importantly, she needed to know if the father she'd spent 20 years wondering about was somehow connected to the billionaire who'd been sitting in her section every morning for the past month. The city lights blurred through her tears as she walked home, the weight of possibility and fear pressing down on her shoulders like the persistent Pacific Northwest. Rain. Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her cramped studio apartment in Capitol Hill, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and trying to convince herself she'd imagined the whole thing. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the pendant, her father's pendant, hanging around a stranger's neck. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and opened her laptop. The blue glow illuminated her determined face as she typed Richard Blackwood into the search bar. Page after page of results filled her screen. Forbes articles about his rise from middle management to CEO. Photos from charity galas, business, acquisitions that had made him one of Seattle's most influential figures. But it was a profile piece from 5 years ago that made her heart stop. The article mentioned Blackwood's mysterious past and how he'd legally changed his name 20 years earlier. His original surname had been Chen. Maya's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp that echoed in her tiny apartment. Chen, the same surname she'd carried her entire life, inherited from the father who'd abandoned her and her mother without explanation. She scrolled frantically through more articles, looking for any mention of family or personal history, but Blackwood's past seemed carefully scrubbed from the internet. The man who'd built $1 billion empire appeared to have materialized out of thin air 2 decades ago. The next morning, Maya arrived at work an hour early, her usual exhaustion replaced by nervous energy. She'd practiced what she would say, rehearsed different approaches, but when Richard Blackwood walked through the door at his usual 8:30 a.m., all her preparation evaporated. He looked different today, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes that matched her own. He sat alone this time, his usual business companions nowhere to be seen. Maya approached his table with calculated casualness, coffee pot in hand. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said, using his name deliberately. His head snapped up, surprise flickering across his features. "You know who I am?" "Hard not to around here. You're kind of famous." Maya forced a smile as she poured his coffee, then took a deep breath. "That pendant you wear, it's really unique. Chinese craftsmanship, isn't it?" Blackwood's entire body tensed. His hand moved instinctively to his chest, fingers closing around the jade dragon as if to hide it. "What makes you ask?" "My father had one just like it. Identical, actually." Maya kept her voice steady, professional. "He used to tell me stories about how his grandfather made it by hand in China before coming to America." The coffee cup slipped from Blackwood's fingers, clattering against the saucer and sending hot liquid spilling across the table. Maya immediately reached for napkins, but his hand shot out, grasping her wrist with surprising strength. "What was your father's name?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Maya looked into his eyes, really looked, and saw something she hadn't noticed before. The same deep brown eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. The same slight upturn at the corners that her mother had always said came from the Chen family line. "David," she whispered back. "David Chen." Blackwood released her wrist as if it had burned him. He stood abruptly, throwing a $20 bill on the table. Far too much for a cup of coffee. "I have to go." "Wait," Maya called out, but he was already striding toward the door. She watched through the rain-streaked windows as he stood on the sidewalk, his phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically. After several minutes, he ended the call and looked back at the coffee shop. Their eyes met through the glass, and Maya saw something that made her chest tighten with recognition. The same expression of desperate longing she'd worn for 20 years whenever she wondered about her missing father. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the Seattle morning crowd. Maya spent the rest of her shift in a daze, replaying their conversation over and over. By closing time, she'd made a decision. She wouldn't wait for him to come back tomorrow. She would find Richard Blackwood, or David Chen, or whoever he really was, and get the answers she'd been searching for her entire adult life. The truth was out there, hanging around a billionaire's neck, and Maya was determined to claim it. Maya stood outside the gleaming Blackwood Industries building in downtown Seattle, her hands trembling as she clutched a manila envelope containing 20 years of questions. The 40-story glass tower reflected the gray October sky, making it look like a monument to secrets and success built on a foundation she was only beginning to understand. Security in the marble lobby was tight, men in black suits with earpieces, who looked like they'd stepped out of a movie. Maya approached the reception desk with more confidence than she felt, her coffee shop uniform replaced by the only professional outfit she owned, a navy blazer she'd bought at Goodwill for job interviews that never led anywhere. "I'm here to see Richard Blackwood," she told the receptionist, a perfectly groomed woman who looked like she earned more in a month than Maya made in a year. Do you have an appointment? The woman's tone suggested she already knew the answer. No. But please tell him Maya Chen is here. He'll know who I am. The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard, and Maya caught a glimpse of the screen. A calendar packed with meetings, conference calls, and board presentations. After a brief phone conversation conducted in hushed tones, the woman looked up with barely concealed surprise. Mr. Blackwood will see you. 40th floor, elevator bank to your right. The elevator ride felt endless. Maya watched the numbers climb, 10, 20, 30, each floor taking her further from the life she knew, and closer to answers that might destroy everything she'd believed about her family. Her reflection in the polished steel doors showed a young woman trying desperately to look composed while her world tilted on its axis. The 40th floor was a testament to wealth and power, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Seattle's skyline, abstract art that probably cost more than Maya's annual tuition, and thick carpeting that muffled every sound. A secretary led her down a hallway lined with awards and newspaper clippings chronicling Blackwood Industries' rise to prominence. Richard Blackwood stood with his back to the door when she entered his office, gazing out at Elliott Bay. He'd removed his suit jacket, and Maya could see the pendant clearly now, the jade dragon that had haunted her dreams for the past 48 hours. 20 years, he said without turning around. 20 years I've wondered if you and your mother were okay. Maya felt her carefully prepared speech evaporate. So you are him. You're David Chen. You're my father. He turned slowly, and Maya saw her own eyes staring back at her. The same eyes, but filled with a pain she was only beginning to comprehend. I was David Chen. That man died the day I walked away from my family. Died. Maya's voice rose, years of suppressed anger finally finding their voice. You didn't die, Dad. You abandoned us. Mom worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table while I wondered every day why my father didn't love me enough to stay. You think I didn't love you? His voice cracked, and for a moment, the billionaire CEO facade crumbled, revealing the broken man underneath. Maya, leaving you and your mother was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I had no choice. There's always a choice, not when people are threatening to kill your family. The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. I got involved with some very dangerous people, Maya. I owed them money, a lot of money. When they started asking questions about you and your mother, I knew I had to disappear. Maya sank into the leather chair across from his desk, her legs suddenly unable to support her. What kind of dangerous people? Richard. She couldn't think of him as her father yet. Moved to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings that painted a picture Maya had never imagined. Her father hadn't been the small-time businessman she remembered. He'd been involved in loan sharking, illegal gambling, and worse. I was young and stupid, and thought I could make quick money to give you and your mother a better life, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead, I nearly got you both killed. The only way to protect you was to disappear completely. Change my name, my identity, everything. But why didn't you ever contact us? Why didn't you let us know you were alive? Because as long as David Chen was dead, you were safe. The moment I reached out, the moment anyone connected Richard Blackwood to my old life, those same people might come looking. He touched the pendant at his throat. This is the only piece of my old life I kept, the only piece of you I could hold on to. Maya stared at this stranger who shared her DNA, trying to reconcile the loving father from her childhood memories with the man standing before her. Outside the windows, Seattle sprawled in every direction, a city built on hills and dreams and the bones of forests that had been cleared to make room for progress. I have a right to know, she said finally. I have a right to decide whether I want to be in your life, knowing the risks. For the first time since she'd entered his office, Richard Blackwood smiled, a small, sad expression that transformed his face into something recognizable, something that looked like home. You're just like your mother, he said, stubborn as hell and braver than you have any right to be. Maya didn't return to work the next day. Instead, she sat in her apartment staring at the business card Richard, she still couldn't call him Dad, had given her, along with a thick envelope containing documents that painted a picture of a life she'd never imagined. Her phone had been ringing all morning. Tom from the coffee shop wondering where she was, her mother in San Francisco, their weekly check-in call that Maya couldn't bring herself to answer, and 3 calls from a number she didn't recognize, each one going to voicemail with no message left behind. The documents spread across her kitchen table told a story of desperation and violence. Police reports from 25 years ago showed David Chen as both victim and perpetrator, beaten by loan sharks one week, arrested for assault the next. Bank records revealed debts that spiraled out of control, loans taken from increasingly dangerous sources to pay off previous loans. The final document in the stack was a newspaper clipping from the San Francisco Chronicle, dated 6 months before her father's disappearance. Chinatown violence escalates as gang war claims 3 lives. David Chen's name appeared in the article as a witness who'd failed to appear for questioning. Maya was so absorbed in reading that she almost missed the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment, almost missed the subtle scraping of metal against metal that might have been someone picking her lock. The door opened before she had time to react. 2 men entered her apartment like they owned it. One tall and thin with graying hair, the other built like a prizefighter with scars crisscrossing his knuckles. They wore expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. Maya Chen, the tall one said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. You've been asking questions about your father. Maya's training from a women's self-defense class she'd taken in college kicked in. Stay calm, look for exits, don't show fear. But her voice still shook when she spoke. I don't know what you're talking about. The shorter man laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. 20 years we've been waiting for David Chen to surface. 20 years we've been watching, waiting for him to make contact with his family. And yesterday, you walked into Richard Blackwood's office building. How did we know? The tall man pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph of herself entering the Blackwood Industries lobby. We've had people watching that building for months. Blackwood made some enemies when he refused to partner with certain business interests in the city. Imagine our surprise when we discovered Richard Blackwood and David Chen are the same person. Maya's mind raced. Her father had said he'd changed his identity to protect them, but these men had found him anyway. And now, they'd found her. What do you want? She asked, proud that her voice came out steady. Your father owes us money, the prizefighter said, stepping closer. A lot of money. With 20 years of interest, we're talking about $8 million. I don't have $8 million. I work in a coffee shop. No, but your daddy does. And now that we know where to find him, we can collect. The tall man moved to her window, peering down at the street below. The question is whether you're going to help us or whether you're going to be a problem. Maya thought about the pendant around her father's neck, the 20 years of wondering and hoping and hurting. She thought about her mother, working herself to exhaustion, while David Chen became Richard Blackwood and built an empire. She thought about the little girl who'd waited by the window every night for a father who never came home. He left us, she said finally. Why would I help him? The 2 men exchanged glances. Smart girl, the tall one said. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your father and arrange a meeting. Somewhere public, somewhere safe. You're going to tell him you want to give your relationship a chance. And if I refuse? The prizefighter pulled back his jacket, revealing the gun holstered beneath. You won't refuse. Maya looked at the documents scattered across her table, at the evidence of her father's criminal past and the violence that had driven him away. She thought about the choice he'd made 20 years ago. Family or safety, love or survival. Now it was her turn to choose. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number on Richard Blackwood's business card. When he answered on the first ring, she could hear the hope in his voice. Maya, I wasn't sure you'd call. I want to see you again, she said, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. Can we meet somewhere? I have questions about Mom, about what happened after you left. Of course, anywhere you want. Maya looked at the two men watching her every move, at the gun that represented the same violence her father had tried to escape. Pike Place Market, she said. Tomorrow at noon by the fish vendors. After she hung up, the tall man smiled. Very good. Now you're going to go about your normal day. You're going to act like nothing has changed. And tomorrow, you're going to help us collect what we're owed. They left as quietly as they'd arrived, but Maya knew they'd be watching. She was trapped between a father who'd abandoned her and men who would kill them both without hesitation. Outside her window, Seattle went about its business, unaware that a 20-year-old debt was about to come due in blood. The next morning, Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual chaos of tourists, street performers, and vendors hawking everything from fresh salmon to handmade jewelry. Maya arrived early, her hands shaking as she clutched a coffee that had long since gone cold. She'd barely slept, spending the night alternating between fury at her father's lies and terror at what the two men might do. She spotted them immediately, the tall one browsing fish at a nearby stall, the prize-fighter pretending to examine pottery. They'd positioned themselves with clear sightlines to the meeting spot, and Maya knew there were probably others she couldn't see. Richard Blackwood appeared at exactly noon, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored coat and polished shoes. But Maya could see the nervousness in his movements, the way his eyes darted around the crowd as if searching for threats he knew might be there. Maya, he said as he approached, his voice warm with genuine affection. Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure. Don't, she cut him off, her voice barely audible above the market noise. Don't pretend this is a normal father-daughter reunion. His expression shifted, the hopeful smile fading as he registered the fear in her eyes. What's wrong? Maya glanced toward the fish stall where the tall man was still pretending to shop. They found me, the people you've been hiding from. They know who you are and they know about us. The color drained from Richard's face. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Where are they? Everywhere. Maya's composure cracked, 20 years of abandoned anger mixing with present terror. They want $8 million, Dad. $8 million. With 20 years of interest for debts you ran away from. I can pay it, he said immediately. Whatever they want, I can. It's not about the money. The words exploded out of her, drawing stares from nearby tourists. Maya lowered her voice, but the intensity remained. It's about you lying to me. It's about you sitting in my coffee shop for months, watching me serve you like a stranger while I wondered every day why my father didn't love me enough to stay. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. Do you know what it's like to grow up believing you're not worth loving? To watch your mother work herself to death while you wonder what you did wrong to make your daddy leave? Richard reached for her, but she stepped back. Maya, please. I was trying to protect you. By lying. By letting us think you were dead. By building a fortune while Mom cleaned office buildings at night to pay rent. She shook her head. I spent 20 years thinking I wasn't good enough for you to stay. And now I find out you've been here all along, successful and rich and alive, while we struggled just to survive. The tall man was moving closer now, his hand inside his jacket. Maya could see the prize fighter positioning himself to cut off escape routes. Whatever was going to happen would happen soon. I need you to listen to me very carefully, Richard said, his CEO voice taking over. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, I need you to run. Go to the parking garage on Western Avenue, level 3, space 47. There's a car there with keys under the driver's seat. Take it and drive to the police station on 5th Avenue. What about you? Don't worry about me. I've been preparing for this day for 20 years. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I'm transferring money to an account in your name. Enough to pay for college, to take care of your mother, to give you the life I always wanted you to have. Maya stared at this man who was her father but also a stranger, who'd protected her by abandoning her, who'd built an empire on the foundation of a lie. Why now? Why risk everything now? Richard looked at her with eyes that held 2 decades of regret and love. Because I realized that trying to protect you by staying away was the biggest mistake of my life. Because you deserved better than a father who was too much of a coward to face his past. The tall man was 10 feet away now, his hand clearly gripping something beneath his jacket. Other shoppers began to sense the tension, the invisible circle of danger that was closing around them. "I love you, Maya," Richard said. "I've loved you every single day for 20 years, and I'm sorry I was too broken to find a better way to keep you safe." Then he pulled the jade pendant from his neck and pressed it into her hands. The carved dragon felt warm against her palm, worn smooth by decades of touch. "This belongs to you," he said. "It always did." Before Maya could respond, Richard stepped toward the tall man, his voice carrying across the market. "Tommy Nguyen, I've been waiting 20 years to settle our debt." The market erupted in chaos. Shoppers screamed and scattered as the two men revealed their weapons. Maya clutched the pendant and ran, pushing through the panicked crowd toward the parking garage, her father's final gift burning like fire in her palm. Behind her, she heard gunshots and shouting, but she didn't look back. She ran toward an uncertain future, carrying the weight of truth and the promise of choice. The same impossible choice her father had faced 20 years before, between safety and love, between survival and family. The jade dragon seemed to pulse, with warmth against her skin, a reminder that some legacies are too precious to abandon, no matter how much they cost.